You built a career telling other people to hold the line, so hold it now. I never left the table. I just stopped letting you see my cards. Then let me see them, Henrietta. Once. Before this all burns down. That was 6 weeks after she stopped being the family failure and started being the only person in the room who knew how to end a strike without ending a company. Here is what you need to know before we go back. Henrietta Nichols was 31 years old, an executive assistant in Myeongdong, treated by her own blood as the daughter who had amounted to nothing. What none of them knew was that before the mobile home, before the quiet, she had sat across from corporate lawyers as a labor negotiator and never once blinked. Her sister took a microphone at an engagement party and called her the failure of the family, framed it as a joke, and every guest laughed on cue. And a man named Seo Jeon, 28 years old, a former idol who now owned a streaming empire and read people the way other men read weather, watched Henrietta not laugh, and understood in about 4 seconds that everyone in that room had underestimated the wrong woman. What does it cost a woman to stay dignified, while the people who share her name make her the punchline? Stay with this one, because that microphone at the engagement party is only the beginning, and this story does not end the way you think it will. So let me ask you first, before any of it unfolds. When your own family humiliates you in a room full of strangers, do you burn it down, or do you hold the line? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. 7 weeks before the microphone, a Tuesday, 9:16 in the morning. Henrietta Nichols stood in the glass elevator of the Fitzgerald conglomerate tower in Myeongdong and counted the floors the way some women count breaths. 41 of them, between the lobby and the executive floor. She had ridden this elevator 611 times by her own reckoning, and she had never once pressed the button for anyone else. She pressed it now, for a man she did not yet know, because his hands were full and hers were not. She was 31 years old. 5'7" in the flats she wore because heels made her taller than half the men she took notes for, and she had learned a long time ago that being underestimated was a kind of coat you could wear into any room. She was born in Central City, New Orleans, in a mobile home on a rented lot within walking distance of the university where she had been the first in her family to enroll. Nobody on this floor knew that. Nobody on this floor knew much about her at all, which was exactly how she had arranged it. Here is what none of them knew, and I'm telling you because you will need it later. Before the mobile home went quiet, before she folded herself down into a job that asked for her calendar and not her mind, Henrietta had sat across steel tables from corporate lawyers and told them no in a voice so level it frightened them. She had been a labor negotiator. She had ended strikes. She had held lines that grown men wept behind. And now she carried coffee and remembered birthdays and let the whole building believe that was the ceiling of her. The man with his hands full was watching her in the reflection of the glass. "You pressed 41, he said. "You did not ask which floor I wanted." "You are carrying 2 laptops and a garment bag," she said. "You are dressed for a boardroom, not a studio. 41 is the only boardroom in this building worth that suit." He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. She felt him recalibrate. Most people, when they are read correctly, get defensive. This man did the opposite. He set the garment bag down against the glass wall like he had decided to stay a while. "Seo Jeon," he said. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Former idol, the kind whose face had sold a decade of things, and then the harder second act, the actor, and then the hardest one of all, the founder. He owned a streaming company that had swallowed 3 studios in 18 months. He was 28 years old, and he was the reason the executive floor had been in a low panic for 2 weeks, because the Fitzgeralds wanted his money and his platform and his name attached to theirs, and men like him did not attach easily. "Henrietta Nichols," she said. "Executive assistant." "No," he said. She looked at him then, actually looked, and that was the mistake, if it was a mistake. He had the stillness of a man who had learned to read a room to survive it, and he was reading her now with an attention that did not feel like flattery. It felt like being seen through a window she had painted over herself. "You held that folder against your chest when the doors opened," he said. "Cover facing in. People who fetch documents do not protect them. People who understand what is inside them do." The elevator settled at 41. The doors opened on the quiet hum of the executive floor. She stepped out first, because she always stepped out first, and she did not answer him, because the truest thing she could have said was, "You are the first person in this country to look at me and see a table instead of a tray. And that was not a thing you said to a stranger at 9:16 in the morning." "Enjoy your boardroom, Mr. John," she said instead. Behind her, quietly, he said, "I intend to." Let me tell you what she did with that, because it matters. She walked to her desk, sat down, opened her calendar, and did not think about it. She was very good at not thinking about things. She had built the not thinking the way other people build a house, one denied brick at a time, and she had been living inside it so long she had stopped noticing the walls. But she noticed him. That night, at 2 a.m, in the flat she rented alone, she noticed that she had not thought about the way a man looked at her in a very, very long time. And here was a man she had known for one elevator ride, and she had thought about it 3 separate times. She lay in the dark and had a small, quiet argument with herself, the kind that has no words, only a pressure. She told the pressure to go back to sleep. It mostly did. Now let me take you to the family, because you cannot understand Henrietta until you understand what she came from and what came from her. The Fitzgeralds were not her family by blood in the way that mattered on paper, but they were her family in the way that leaves marks. Her mother had married into the name years ago, and the name had come with a conglomerate and a younger daughter and a very clear ranking system. Corey Fitzgerald was the younger daughter. Corey was 29 and beautiful in the effortful way that costs a great deal to maintain. And Corey had a talent, a real one, for making a room believe whatever she needed it to believe about her. What Corey needed the room to believe was that she was the successful one. And you cannot be the successful one without a failure to stand next to. That was Henrietta's assigned position in the family portrait. The contrast, the before to Corey's after. The cautionary sister who went all the way to America and came all the way back with nothing to show for it but a title that meant carrying other people's bags. I want to be fair to you about how this worked, because it was rarely loud. Cruelty that lasts is rarely loud. It was Corey introducing her at dinners as my sister. She helps out at the company, with a little smile that turned help out into charity. It was Corey asking, in front of guests, whether Henrietta had eaten, as though Henrietta might not have been able to afford to. It was 1,000 small deposits into an account labeled, "She is less than me." And Corey made those deposits the way other people breathe, without deciding to. The two of them stood in the same office 3 days after the elevator, and I want you to watch the leverage in the room, because that is the thing I am always watching. Corey came onto the executive floor in a coat that cost more than Henrietta made in a season. She came to see their father, technically her father, and she came early enough to be seen doing it. She stopped at Henrietta's desk the way you stop at a landmark. "You look tired," Corey said. "Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine, Corey." "You should take something. I know a doctor." Corey glanced at the calendar on the screen, at the neat blocks of someone else's day. "It's sweet, honestly, that they keep you busy. Father worries you'd just sit at home otherwise." Here is what Henrietta said. "Your 2 o'clock got moved to Thursday. The John meeting. They pushed it. Here is what Henrietta did not say, and I'm letting you in because no one else was let in. She did not say I ended a strike at a plant with 4,000 workers when I was younger than you are now. She did not say I have negotiated against men who would eat you alive, and I sent them home with less than they came for. She did not say you are standing over me because you need me down here. Because if I stood up, you would have nothing to measure yourself against. She said the thing about the 2 o'clock, and she smiled the flat smile of an assistant who has been useful. And Corey took the information and left, satisfied, the way you leave a mirror that has told you what you wanted. Do you see it? The most powerful person in that exchange was the one sitting down. She just could not afford to prove it yet. The Gion meeting moved to Thursday, which is how Henrietta ended up in the M&A war room on a floor she did not usually reach, taking notes she did not usually take. The war room was a long room with one wall of glass and one wall of screens, and it was where the family did the work that fed the family, the buying and selling of other companies, the quiet mechanics of the wealth that let Corey call her sister a failure over dinner. Henrietta had been sent up to take the minutes because the usual analyst had food poisoning and because minutes were beneath everyone in that room except her. Seo Ho-jeon sat at the far end. He did not sit at the head, which told her something. Men with real leverage did not need the head of the table. They let the table arrange itself around them. He watched the Fitzgerald executives make their pitch, 4 of them talking over each other about synergy and reach and the future of Korean content, and he said almost nothing, and his almost nothing pulled the whole room off balance, because they kept selling harder into his silence. Henrietta wrote it all down. She wrote the numbers, the percentages, the ownership structures, and somewhere around the 3rd slide she stopped only transcribing and started seeing. Because the old part of her, the negotiator, woke up the way a limb wakes when you finally stop sitting on it. The Fitzgeralds were offering him a minority stake and calling it a partnership. They were dressing a leash as a handshake. She could see it as clearly as she could see the rain starting on the glass wall behind him. A soft gray rain over Myeongdong. The first sense memory that would stay with her from that room, the sound of it under the sound of men lying politely. He caught her stillness. Across the length of that table, past 4 executives, mid-sentence, he caught the exact moment she stopped writing and started reading. And something in his face changed. Not a smile. Something more careful than a smile. When the meeting broke, the executives filed out to celebrate a deal that had not actually been agreed to. He stayed. She stayed, because someone had to collect the printed decks, and no one had told her she could go. You stopped writing at slide 9, he said. I ran out of things worth writing. Slide 9 was the ownership waterfall. She squared the papers against the table. Was it? You know it was. He stood, unhurried, and came a few steps closer, and stopped at a distance she noticed, a deliberate distance, close enough to speak low and far enough to leave her the room. They think they are buying me, he said. You saw it before they finished the sentence. I watched you see it. I take minutes, Mr. John. You take everything, he said. The minutes are just the part they can read. The rain went on against the glass. She should have said something deflecting. She had 100 of them, worn smooth from use. Instead, she was quiet and let herself be quiet, and that quiet was the most honest thing she had offered anyone in this building in 3 years, and I think some part of her knew it and was frightened of it. They are offering you 19% and structuring the board so you can never reach 20, she said finally. It looks generous for about 40 seconds. Then it looks like a cage. He did not react the way she expected. He did not thank her, or press her, or ask how an assistant knew the difference between 19 and 20. He just looked at her for a long moment, the way you look at a thing you have been searching for without knowing its shape. Who taught you to see that? He said. Not a question. An offering. A door left open. Nobody you've met, she said, and picked up the decks, and left him standing in the war room with the rain and the screens and the beginning of a thought about her that would take him weeks to say out loud. That was 7 weeks before the microphone, before the engagement party, before Corey stood up in front of every guest they knew and reached for the one weapon she had always been allowed to use for free. Henrietta did not know yet that the party was coming. She only knew, writing down 41 floors with a folder held cover in against her chest, that a man she had spoken to twice had looked at her twice, and both times had seen the table instead of the tray, and that she was going to have to decide, very soon, whether she could afford to be seen. The invitation came on cream stock so heavy it did not bend when Henrietta held it. And that was Corey all over. The refusal to bend made into paper. Corey Fitzgerald was getting engaged. The man was a shipping heir named something Henrietta forgot on purpose. A pleasant, forgettable person whose family owned ports in 3 countries, which was the only fact about him that Corey ever repeated. The party would be held in the ballroom of a hotel that overlooked the river, 300 guests, a string quartet, and Henrietta was invited the way you invite the weather, as a background condition rather than a person. She almost did not go. I want you to know that she stood in her flat at 2 a.m. again, the invitation on the counter, and she had a small, silent argument with herself about whether a woman was required to attend her own humiliation. But her mother called, and her mother's voice did the thing it always did, when thin and pleading, said it would look strange if you were not there, said Corey wants you there, and both of them knew that last part was a lie, and neither of them said so. So she went. Because holding the line, she had learned a long time ago, sometimes just means showing up to the place designed to break you and refusing to break on schedule. Before the party, though, there were 3 weeks, and I have to tell you what happened in those 3 weeks, because that is where the real story lives, in the slow accumulation of a thing neither of them named. The John deal did not close. It stalled, and it stalled in a way that put Henrietta back in that war room more than once, because Seo John had developed a habit that the executive floor found flattering and Henrietta found unnerving. He asked for her. Not by name, not at first. He would say, at the end of a session, that he preferred to have the same person minute every meeting for continuity, and the same person was her. He would arrive 14 minutes early to a meeting that started at 10 and find her setting up the room, and he would not fill the silence with talk the way other powerful men did. He would just be in the room while she worked, and the being was its own kind of conversation. "You always test the pens," he said one morning, watching her draw a small line on the corner of each notepad. "A dead pen in a negotiation is a tell," she said, before she could stop herself. "You reach for it, it fails, and for 1 second everyone sees you unprepared. 1 second is enough." He did not say anything for a moment, then, "Enough for what?" "For the other side to remember they can win." She felt the words land wrong, felt them reveal the shape of a woman who had sat at tables where winning and losing were the whole point, and she busied herself with the pens and did not look at him. He let it go. That was the thing about him she was beginning to understand and mistrust. He collected the pieces of her she dropped, and he did not show her his hands, and she had no way of knowing what he was building. Here is a piece he collected, and I am pointing at it so you remember it later. One afternoon, the war room screens were showing the Fitzgerald holdings, the whole sprawl of them, and among the logos was an overseas subsidiary, a factory in Singapore that assembled components for half the electronics in the building. One of the executives mentioned dismissively that the Singapore plant had labor noise again, the 3rd time in a year, and that they might have to send someone. "Send who?" Seo asked, mild, almost bored. "Legal, probably. Or we let it burn a week and they come back hungry." Henrietta wrote labor noise in her minutes and underlined it once, a small private line, and across the table Seo Jeon watched her underline it, and neither of them said a word, but he saw the underline. I promise you he saw it. He was a man who noticed which words a quiet woman decided to press her pen into twice. What she did not let herself feel in those 3 weeks was how much she looked forward to the 14 minutes before 10. She had built a whole architecture of not feeling, remember, one denied brick at a time, and she kept adding bricks. And the trouble with a wall you build against a person is that you have to think about them every time you lay one down. She was thinking about him constantly in the act of trying not to. She knew what that was. She was 31, not a girl. She just could not afford it. A woman in her position, an assistant with a hidden spine, and a family that needed her folded small, did not get to want the most watched man in the country. That was not caution. That was arithmetic. "You could sit down at these meetings," he said to her once, near the end of the third week, when the room had emptied and the rain had come back the way it seemed to come back whenever he was in that room. "There is a chair. You could use it." "I have a chair. It is against the wall." "That is not a chair. That is a punishment with cushions." She almost laughed. That was the dangerous part, the almost laugh, because a woman who has trained herself not to feel can guard against sorrow far better than she can guard against being made to laugh by someone who is paying attention. "When they offer me the table," she said, "I will sit at it. They will never offer you the table." He said it gently, without pity, as a fact. People like this do not offer tables. The table has to be taken. And you would know. "I took mine," he said. "It cost more than I show." And there it was, the first crack he let her see. So small she might have missed it. A man saying the price of his own table was higher than his face admitted. She filed it away the way he filed away her underlines. Two people collecting each other's dropped pieces, and neither one showing their hands. Now the party. The ballroom overlooked the river, and the river held the city lights the way spilled ink holds a lamp, and there were 300 people in clothes that announced themselves. Henrietta wore gray. She wore gray on purpose, the color of a person who does not intend to be looked at, and she stood near a pillar with a glass of something she did not drink, and she performed the small competent invisibility she had perfected over 611 elevator rides. Corey was luminous. I will give her that, because I want you to see her clearly. Corey Fitzgerald in white and gold moved through that room like she had rehearsed it, and she had. And she touched every important shoulder and laughed at every important joke, and she was, for those first 90 minutes, the successful daughter in full flower, and the flower had roots that only worked if there was rot to grow out of, and the rot's name was standing by the pillar in gray. Henrietta saw him arrive. Of course she saw him. Seoho-jeon came in without an entrance, which was its own kind of entrance, and the room bent toward him, and he let it bend and did not feed it, and his eyes found her by the pillar in about the time it takes to cross a room with your gaze. He did not come to her. He understood, she realized, that coming to her would cost her, would make her visible on a night she had dressed to disappear, and so he stayed across the room and gave her the distance the way he had given it in the war room, close enough to be felt, far enough to leave her the room. It was the most considerate thing anyone had done for her in months, and he did it by not walking 20 feet. Then Corey took the microphone. It was meant for thank yous. The quartet paused, and Corey stood on the small riser by the windows with the river behind her, and she thanked her fiancé and his port-owning family and her father, and the room made its warm party sounds, and Henrietta felt the thing coming the way you feel a train through your feet before you hear it. Because Corey's eyes had already found her. Corey had located her failure by the pillar, and the smile had changed, sharpened into the shape it took right before she made a deposit. "And I have to thank my sister," Corey said, and 300 faces turned obediently to follow the pointing of her voice. "Henrietta came all the way back from America to be with us," Corey said, warm as a knife left in the sun. "She had such big dreams over there. First in the family at that little college, we were all so proud." A pause, timed. "And now she keeps my father's calendar, which, honestly, somebody has to, and she is so good at it, and I just think it is so brave, to come home with nothing and start over carrying coffee." The word brave did the work. The room understood the word brave. "To my sister," Corey said, lifting her glass, "the family failure, who never gave up trying to be useful." And the laugh came. On cue, the way it always came, 300 people releasing the little cruel breath of relief that it was not them. And the sound of it went up into the chandeliers, and Henrietta stood in her gray by the pillar and did not move. Here is what she felt, and I am telling you because no one in that ballroom was allowed to know. She felt the old table under her palms. She felt the steel of it, cold, the way it had been cold in rooms where men with more money than God had tried to break 4,000 people, and she had told them no in a voice so level it frightened them. She felt every negotiation she had ever won, folded up small inside a woman in gray, being laughed at by strangers. And the not feeling she had built brick by brick held. It held. Because she made it hold. Because she was the most powerful person in that room, and she still could not afford to prove it. She did not cry. She did not smile the flat smile either, not this time. She simply set her untouched glass on the tray of a passing waiter, and she inclined her head toward her sister the precise degree that etiquette required, and no degree more, and she turned to leave, because leaving on your own feet is not the same as being driven out, and she knew the difference the way she knew the difference between 19 and 20. She got as far as the corridor outside the ballroom before she stopped, one hand flat against the cool marble of the wall, and let herself breathe once, all the way down, the only crack she would allow herself the whole night. That was not a joke, a voice said. Seo Hojeon had followed her out, not close. 10 feet down the corridor, hands in his pockets, having read the room and left it the same way she had, without an exit that anyone would remember. It was framed as one, she said without turning. Framing is what people do when the truth would embarrass them. He came a few steps closer, that deliberate distance again. She needs you to be the failure. I have watched her for 3 weeks decide who she is by standing next to who you are not. It is the only structure she has. Henrietta turned to look at him then. The corridor was dim, and the party sound came through the door softened, the laughter already moving on to some other relief. Why are you out here, Mr. John? Because I do not laugh on cue, he said, and because I wanted you to see one person in this building who did not. She should have deflected. She had 100 of them. Instead, she looked at him for a long moment, the way you look at a thing you have stopped expecting, and the honesty of the quiet between them was almost unbearable. And she was the one who broke it because she was not ready to be seen that clearly on the worst night of her year. You should go back in, she said. They will want your face. They can have my face, he said. It is the least interesting thing I own. A beat. You underlined labor noise. She went still. So he had brought it out here, the piece he had collected. She had wondered if he would. 3 weeks ago, he said, the Singapore plant. Legal, or let it burn a week. You underlined those 2 words, and you pressed the pen in twice. He watched her with that careful attention that was not flattery. An assistant would have written the whole sentence and moved on. You underlined the part everyone in that room thought was beneath them. Maybe I have neat handwriting. Maybe, he said, and let her keep the lie, because he was a man who understood that you do not force a door you have already found the hinge of. The Singapore situation is getting worse, by the way. They are not sending legal. They are not letting it burn. It is past both of those now. Something in her chest, the old limb, woke and stretched. How much worse? She said, and she heard the change in her own voice, and she could not take it back. Bad enough that the deal I have not signed is starting to depend on it, he said. Bad enough that a factory floor of 4,000 people is about to decide the value of a company your family thinks it controls. He tilted his head, the smallest motion. You know something about a floor of 4,000 people. I do not know how I know that. But I know it. The party breathed behind the doors. The river held the lights. And Henrietta Nichols stood in a gray dress in a marble corridor, having just been named the family failure in front of everyone she knew, and the only person who had followed her out was the one man who had looked at the underline instead of the woman being laughed at, and she understood, with a clarity that frightened her more than any humiliation, that the thing she had folded herself small to hide was about to be the only thing standing between this family and its own collapse. Good night, Mr. John, she said. Good night, Henrietta, he said. Her first name, quiet, offered like the door he kept leaving open. She did not take it, not that night. but she carried it down 41 floors of nothing at all. The sound of her own name in his voice and the word Singapore underneath it pressed into her twice. The strike broke on a Wednesday, and it broke the way real things break, all at once after a long time of pretending they would not. Henrietta got the call at 4 in the morning, which is when factories in Singapore are 3 hours ahead of a woman lying awake in Myeongdong. It was not her call to get. She was an executive assistant. But the man on the other end was Seo Ho-jeon, and he did not apologize for the hour. They walked off the line at midnight, he said. All 4,000. The floor is dark. Your family is sending legal and a translator who has never stood in front of an angry room in his life. A pause. The deal I have not signed dies at the end of the week if that plant does not turn back on. So does the plant. So do the 4,000. She sat up in the dark. The old limb was awake now, fully, stretching to its whole length. Why are you telling me? She said. Because you underlined it, he said. Because I have a plane on the tarmac in 90 minutes, and I would like you to be on it. Not as an assistant. As the only person I have met in this country who knows what a floor of 4,000 people is actually asking for when they say they are angry. She should have said no. She had 100 of them. Instead, she looked at the gray light coming up over the city, the same gray she wore to disappear, and she said, "They will fire me for going." "Then let them," he said, "or let them try after." The war room they set up in Singapore smelled of cold coffee and floor wax, and through the glass wall, Henrietta could see the plant itself, a vast dark hall of stilled machines. And outside its gates, the workers stood in the heat in loose ranks, patient in the way that frightens management most, because patience means they have decided something. The Fitzgerald team had flown in overnight. 2 lawyers, a communications man, and Corey. Corey had come because their father had sent her, because the successful daughter was supposed to be seen putting out a fire, and Corey stood at the head of the table in a linen suit that had not been made for a factory and looked at Henrietta, walking in beside Seo Ho-jeon like a woman watching furniture rearrange itself against the laws of physics. "What is she doing here?" Corey said. "She's here because I asked her," Seo-ho said, and said nothing else, and his nothing pulled the room off balance the way it always did. The lawyers had a plan. The plan was to threaten the organizers with termination, offer a small wage adjustment framed as generosity, and reopen the line by Friday. Henrietta listened to all of it. She listened the way she used to listen across steel tables, letting them spend their whole hand. "That will close the plant," she said when they finished. The comms man laughed. Corey did not. "You threaten the organizers," Henrietta said, "and you tell 4,000 people that the ones who spoke for them are disposable. They will not go back hungry. They will go back never. You are not looking at a wage dispute. You underlined the wrong word." She let that land on Corey, gently, without a smile. They walked at midnight in a coordinated action across 3 shifts. That is not noise. That is a union that has been organizing quietly for a year, because every time it surfaced, someone here said, "Let it burn a week." They are not asking for money. They are asking to be believed the next time they say something is wrong. "And you know this how?" Corey said, and there was an edge in it now, because the furniture was talking. "Because I used to do what they are doing," Henrietta said. From the other side of the gate. The room went quiet. Seo Ho-jeon leaned back in his chair and let her have it, the whole table, and did not say a word, because a man who understands leverage knows when the most powerful person in the room has finally stood up. She did not perform it. That is the part I want you to sit with. She did not turn to Corey and make her watch. She turned to the plant. For 6 hours, Henrietta Nichols worked the way she had been born to work. She went out to the gate in the heat in her flats, and she did not bring the lawyers. She found the 3 people the crowd's eyes kept drifting toward, the real organizers. And she did not threaten them, and she did not flatter them. She asked them what had actually happened, and then she listened, which no one from the tower had done in a year. The grievance was not the wage. It was a safety line on the assembly floor that had failed twice, and a supervisor who logged the failures as worker error, and a promise made 4 times and broken 4 times. Legal or let it burn. Someone had underlined the cost of the fix and decided the workers were cheaper. She came back in with a document. 1 page. She had written it by hand and had it typed, and it did not read like a settlement. It read like the truth, laid out in plain numbers. The false precision of a woman who knew that 4,000 people believe specifics and distrust adjectives. 2 failed safety lines. 14 months of ignored reports. A supervisor reassigned, not fired, because you do not trade one person's dignity for another's, even when it would be satisfying. A joint safety board, half management, half floor, with a vote that could stop the line. And the organizers protected in writing, by name, so that speaking up could never again cost a person their place. They will never sign that, the senior lawyer said. The board loses control of the floor. The board never had the floor, Henrietta said. It had the machines. Those are different things. You just learned the difference the expensive way. She took it out to the gate herself. And a floor of 4,000 people, who had walked into the dark at midnight, read 1 page in the heat and began, in ranks, to come back in. Now here is where it turned, and here is the part the whole story was built to reach. So let me slow down and let you stand in it. When the line came back on and the machines woke the hall with light, the Fitzgerald comms man wanted a photograph. Cory, understandably, wanted the photograph to be of Cory. And Seo Jeon, who had watched all of it from the glass, chose that moment to speak, quietly, in front of the lawyers and the comms man and the plant manager and Cory, in the level voice of a man reciting weather. Before anyone claims this, he said, I want the room to know who wrote that page, and I want the room to know something else. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. The safety reports that were logged as worker error for 14 months were signed off, quarter after quarter, by the executive who called this labor noise and recommended letting it burn. I have the sign-offs. I collect things people drop. His eyes moved once to Cory, who had approved the last 2 herself with her father's proxy, eager to look decisive, and had not read what she signed. I could put those on every screen in this building in about 40 seconds. I have done more with less. The room understood. Cory understood fastest of all. Her standing, her whole careful architecture of the successful daughter, sat exposed on a table in Singapore, 1 keystroke from 300 of the people who had laughed on cue. And they all looked at Henrietta because it was hers to spend. Seoho had put the weapon in her hand, openly, the way he did everything, and left her the room. She looked at the sign-offs. She looked at her sister, who had called her the family failure into a microphone 12 days before, whose face was doing the thing faces do when the floor is gone. This is what she felt, and I'm telling you because it is the truest thing in this whole story. She felt how easy it would be. She had earned it. Every deposit into that account labeled, "She is less than me." She could withdraw it now, all at once, in front of witnesses. And she chose not to. No, Henrietta said. We do not put those on a screen. The comms man blinked. Seoho did not. I think he had known she would say it. I think it was the reason he had trusted her with the hand at all. The sign-offs go to the safety board, Henrietta said, through the proper channel with the reports in the record where they cannot be buried again. If there is accountability, it comes from the process, not from a screen and a bad afternoon. Because if I take her down with a keystroke, I am telling those 4,000 people that the way to win is power in the right hands instead of truth in the open. And I spent my whole life on the other side of that gate learning it is the opposite. She set the page down, squared it against the table the way she squared everything. I did not come here to destroy anyone, she said, to the room, but really to her sister, and for once she let herself be looked at while she said it. I came to fix a floor. It is fixed. That is the entire story. Corey Fitzgerald stood at the head of a table she no longer controlled and understood, at last, what she had been standing next to for all those years, and what it had cost her to keep calling it a failure. They flew back to Myeongdong on a Thursday, the plant humming behind them, and for the first hour, neither of them spoke. Henrietta watched the clouds go silver over the water and let the old limb rest, finally, having been used the way it was built to be used. You had the sign-offs the whole time, she said. You could have ended her yourself in the war room, weeks ago. I could have, Seoho said. I was waiting to see what you would do with them. He looked at her then, that careful attention that had never once felt like flattery. You did the thing almost no one does. You had the shot, and you chose the record instead of the screen. It was not mercy, she said. It was arithmetic. Power in the right hands is still just power. I wanted the truth in the open. I know, he said. That is why I trusted you with it. The plane leveled. She thought about the 6 weeks, the 14 minutes before 10, the pens she tested, the pieces they had each collected and never shown. You said your table cost more than you show, she said. What did it cost? He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then he told her about the live broadcast early in his career, the one the agency had buried, the way a camera's red light still closed his throat. The crack he had let her see in the war room opened all the way now, offered like her own name in a marble corridor. You collect what people drop, she said. I'm giving you that one back. It stays with me. I know, he said again. And that was the whole of it, 2 people who had spent their lives not showing their hands, laying them flat on the table at last, face up, between the clouds. His phone lit as they landed. He read it, and something in his jaw shifted, and he turned the screen toward her. Another subsidiary, another fire, in another country, already spreading. For the first time in 3 years, Henrietta did not fold herself small. She read it once, all the way down, and the old level voice came back, steady as a held line. Okay, she said. Here is what we do. She had learned that dignity is not the absence of anger, only the discipline of where you put it. She had learned that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding the line. She had learned that being seen is a thing you survive, and then, if you are very lucky, a thing you choose. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me the truth. When Henrietta had the shot and chose the record instead of the screen, would you have done the same? Or would you have put it on every screen in the building? If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, and I promise the next story will be even harder to walk away from. Thank you for watching until the very end. I will see you in the next one.